Hi, it's Andy, and today I'm bringing you my January wrap-up. In January, I managed to read 12 books, which is better than last year, because last year it was 10, but also quite possibly going to be my worst month. And I think it was because a few of these books were not a slog to get through, but they just took me time. So yeah, 12 books, which is still a lot. Like, I remember a few years ago where I was thrilled if I could read 10 books was a stretch goal in a month. So I need to shut up and just accept the fact that 12 books is a good number. What I'm going to do, as always, is go through the books, wrap them up, and tell you what I thought of them. The first thing I read in January was actually my pull from my jar, which is down here. So I have a 12 and 12 jar. So 12 of my friends have given me 12 books to read and 12 prompts to fulfill. And my first pull was Pia, and Pia had wanted me to read Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This is a world in which death has been overcome. So it's a utopian world where everybody has their purpose, everybody has a job, nobody wants for anything. The jobs are kind of just to keep things going. Like, there's enough food for everybody, there's enough resources for everybody. Like, the world is basically perfect. But nobody dies. And that's a problem, because we need the population to continue to balance. Like, we can't just keep going up and up and up. Even in a perfect world, we would run out of resources. So there are these things called scythes, who are the only people that are allowed to kill. And by people don't die, I mean, even if they do die, they can be completely brought back to life unless they are burned. And so the scythes are ordained with gleaning people, or killing people, basically. I thought it was going to be some kind of technological scythe thing where it's beep boop, you're dead. It's not. They can really get invested in how they kill people. And there has come a time now that the scythes are asked to take on apprentices. And so the scythe that we follow, Scythe Faraday, takes on 2 apprentices, which is unusual. And because someone who doesn't like him has decided they don't like that, the council have come to the decision that one of these scythes apprentices, whoever loses, has to be gleaned by the other. And so these 2 who have been working together, who have kind of become friends, end up getting split up to 2 different scythes to be apprenticed to. And they learn different ways of killing, different ways of thinking, different philosophies. And there's so much going on in the background that nobody has ever explained to me in this book. This book is full of, this is a proper dystopian level, Hunger Games, Divergent, in the background something absolutely wild is going on kind of thing. I thought it was going to be a nice, they plod along, they pick people to die. That was about it. It is not. This is definitely action-packed. And some of the characters in here are downright psychotic. I am really enamoured by this. I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first, but I am interested to read the next book. This is one of those books that I haven't stopped thinking about since reading it, and I want to know where the characters go next. The next thing I read was Clanlands New Zealand by Sam Hewen and Graham McTavish. Don't know what I was trying to call him there. This is like Clanlands, the original, but in New Zealand. So they go around places in New Zealand because Graham lives there, and they do different things, they try different things. There are pictures of some of the things that they try, some of the places that they go, and it's really quite cool. There's so much you can do in New Zealand. There's so much rich history, culture, and it basically is just a snapshot of different parts of that, along with a good dollop of the history of the indigenous people who live in New Zealand and who lived there before white people turned up and did what we do. But this, I love this. I would love to go to New Zealand now. I wanted to go to New Zealand anyway because I had a friend who lived there, and it just seems so incredible. It's very similar to Scotland in so many different ways, and it would just be incredible to find somewhere that feels like home but is not home, and I think that's what people found when they went over there. It was very similar to where they lived, and then it was just somewhere else. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I listened to the audiobook as I read it, so it is Graham and Sam doing the audiobook, and there's often bits where they will, so like there's bits where like they're each doing a bit, and then they'll like intersperse like little comments and stuff. The friendship they've got and the way they just antagonise each other is just so funny, and you really get that through the book and through the narrative of the audiobook and through just the writing. I cannot wait. I think they filmed this. I can't remember if they did or not, but I really hope they did, because I would love to watch that. Men in Kilts is the original one that they did, that they then made into the book Clanlands, so hopefully that makes sense. The next thing was a bit slightly off kilter, and that was Make You Mine This Christmas by Lizzie Huxley Jones. I was determined to read this book. This book was getting read. This book was not getting away from the winter season. Now, I read these all pretty rapidly. I was reading like a book every other day, but I wasn't just reading one book. Like, I had one book that I was reading in bed and one book I was reading downstairs. So like, I read this quite early in the month, and I still had that Christmassy-esque feeling. And I really wanted to read this because Lizzie Huxley Jones, they are a non-binary disabled author, and also one of the main characters has EDS, and I'm loving seeing like EDS or worm its way into books. I'm loving seeing characters with EDS and characters whose abilities and disabilities sort of mirror mine in some ways. We're all different, but seeing those bits of yourself in a character is always lovely. And I really enjoyed this. I don't remember too much of what happens, but basically our main character, whose name I can't remember, meets this guy at a holiday party that she didn't want to go to. She's just had a really bad time of it, and her friend like drives her out to this party, and then she meets this guy, and his ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend come over to them while they're kissing under mistletoe, like, because like the kiss isn't even, they're not even attracted to each other. She's just like, oh look, mistletoe, and goes on a total like Phoebe rant about like what happens to mistletoe if it didn't fulfill its purpose of having people kiss under it. So they kiss under the mistletoe. His ex-girlfriend comes over, and obviously like can't, like, she's like, I'm not going to let this guy lose face, so like she pretends to be his girlfriend, and then his ex, who's like a total blabbermouth, tells everybody, like his parents and everything, and so they invite her over for Christmas, and she's like, I've got no plans anyway, and he's like, I would really help, because then they'll stop bugging me about being sad over my ex. And so she goes, and before she gets there, she meets this woman in a bookshop, and they have like a moment, and then she leaves, and then she gets to the house and turns out it's this guy's sister, and she's like, oh crap. So she's fallen for this sister, and the sister's fallen for her, and like, these two have no sort of relationship, but she thinks that they do. It's a whole complex thing, and I love it. It's so funny at times. It's like proper slapstick. It reminds me a little bit of Love Theoretically by Ellie Hazelwood, in that way where like one of them knows, like some of them know some things and some of them don't, and they're trying to keep the other secret while not making themselves look bad. I know there is another book, Kiss Her Once for Me or something like that, that I know some of my friends have read both and have preferred that one, although I think they read that one first, so I don't know if it would be the other way around, depending on which story you got first. But I really like this. I think I would probably like this more anyway, because one of the characters has EDS, and I really appreciate the rep in this. The rep in this is fantastic. It is beautifully done. Lizzie Huxley Jones themselves are disabled. I can't remember if they've got EDS or not, but I've been onto their website and everything, and they are disabled. And they've done a fantastic job of bringing that onto the page. And the main character is fat. The main character is fat and treated amazingly by people who seem like they wouldn't treat her amazingly. You need to read it to actually understand. But I really enjoy this. I'm so glad I got to it. And I'm so glad I have I think it's the Illumicrate version. Yeah, the Illumicrate version, because I really like this colour. The next thing I read was Ashton Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. I really enjoyed this. I actually loved this. I preferred this to Delilah Green Doesn't Care. And I literally could not find a fault with this book. I have since recalculated that because something has been pointed out to me that wasn't handled particularly well, and I completely agree that there is something in here that's done poorly. But other than that, everything else was fantastic. I loved the way it played with the supernatural a little bit, and I just loved the characters. Like, that was the thing, I loved the characters. I loved the fact that Astrid was a baby bisexual and she had no clue that she liked women until she met this other character whose name I can't remember, Jordan. And I love Jordan. Like, I would absolutely, like, if I was Astrid, I would have fallen in love with Jordan as well. Like, Jordan is like peak. Like, I love Jordan so much. And I just love these two together as well. I loved so much about this. I really am looking forward to Iris Kelly doesn't date, because if she's continuing to get this much better, like Delilah Green Doesn't Care was not my favourite at all. I was like, nah, it's fine. This one was so much better for me, so I'm hoping that Iris Kelly does that and just gets, again, much, much better. This follows on from Delilah Green Doesn't Care, and it sort of follows the fallout with Astrid and her mum, and Astrid is working for the company that her and mum own, which is a interior design company. And then there's this inn that is kind of going under a little bit, that's like a big town thing, and they're trying to revamp the place, so they get a TV show involved who revamp places like this, and Astrid is taken on as their interior designer. But her plans for modernising this place do not go well with Jordan and how she wants her childhood home to be respected. And so at every point, Jordan is trying to undermine Astrid, while Astrid is just trying to keep afloat. And neither of them know what the other is doing. Like, Jordan just thinks Astrid has no respect and just wants everything to be whitewashed and modern. And Astrid thinks that Jordan just doesn't like her and just wants to get in her way for funsies. See, once these two actually talk it out, it's such a great conversation. It's such a great moment where they're like, well, let's work together. And see, when they work together, they are an absolutely unstoppable force. I love this book so much. The next thing I read was, again, for my 12 and 12, and that was for the prompt that Pia gave me, which was to read a book with red on the cover. And for that, I picked up Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This was not what I thought it was going to be. Absolutely not what I thought this was going to be. So this is a book in which there is a caste system of colours. And it's not just like you're filtered into colours by like, there's no like system for being like, you're this, you're this, you're this. You're literally born this. Like, there are genetic modifications that have been made to people for centuries, for millennia possibly, to get them to this place. So the reds are the lowest of the low, the golds are the highest of the high. And even down to like the reds have red hair, red eyes, and the golds have golden blonde hair, gold eyes. The golds are warriors and the reds are miners. And so the reds are held in slavery on Mars, or underneath Mars, to mine this compound called helium-3, which they are told is needed to terraform the planet. But unbeknownst to the reds, they have been kept in slavery because the place has already been terraformed for centuries, and they don't know, and they are just kept underground mining and given scraps and starved and treated extremely poorly. And one night when Darrow is taken to the surface of Mars, he is shown that this has already been terraformed, and it sets off a string of events where Darrow's wife becomes a martyr so that he will be spurred into action to help take down the system. And he is pulled then by another group who are like the revolutionary group people, because there's always that in dystopian novels, and they're like, Darrow, we want you to go undercover. And I'm like, how is he going to go undercover? Do not read this if you're squeamish. They literally need to remake his entire body, like surgically, like violently surgically, like I even thought it was a little bit disgusting level surgically. And then he's put into this school, which ends up like a Hunger Games scenario where they're all put into this thing and it's like, there you go, fight it out, see who comes out top. And it's like, excuse me? What? This was bloody and gory and didn't pull any punches. Nobody is safe, and I don't think I liked anybody. I don't think I liked any of each of the characters annoyed me in their own way. But I think that was the point. Like, it feels like the point. Based on just reading this alone, I would not read this series. But given what other people have said about the series, I am willing to at least finish the first trilogy. So we shall see, because I went into this with totally different expectations, and I think that has really, like, I thought this was going to be a lot more, not fluffy, but like, not, I didn't think it was going to go as dark, as quick as this did. So just be warned, if you want to read this, it goes dark quick. It goes dark quick. And then because of the trauma of Red Rising, I picked up Chicken Mate by Ellie Hazelwood, which I was petrified to read. Don't ask me why I'm saying my syllables funny. I've just realised this is the second word at least that I've done that with. I was absolutely petrified to read this book. I did not think I was going to like it. I was like, there's no way I'm going to enjoy a YA novel by an author who predominantly writes adult romance, smutty romance. I'm like, how? I don't understand how she's going to manage that. Like, I've been let down by authors before, so I had the fear. And honestly, that I need to stop. Every time I have this kind of fear, I love the book. I loved this. These characters were actually possibly better than the characters in our adult books. They were so much more complex. There was so much more going on. We got so much more backstory, and just, like, I loved this. I understood nothing about the chess, but it didn't matter. Like, I really, really enjoyed this. One of the characters I wanted to lob out a window of a very high building. Like, just out the, just go. Yeah, I actually really, really enjoyed this. And it's not young adult. There is sex in this, and the sex is what I would have considered explicit when I was a young adult reader. Nothing like this, but there's still, like, obvious sex in this book. So I wouldn't give it to, like, when we're talking young adult, it's such a weird sort of, like, scale. I wouldn't give this to, like, a young adult. I would give this to, like, I don't even have any, like, a young adult. Like, I would give this to the older side of young adult. So maybe, like, 15 up is probably the area that I would recommend this for, because giving this to a 12-year-old would make me uncomfortable with the level of sex that's in here. But at the same time, the characters are of age. It's not, like, grotesque in any way. It's just, you know what I mean. I don't know if you know what I mean. But anyway, loved this. Loved the characters. Loved the way they were done. Loved the story. I would happily reread this. Like, it made me want to learn about chess. A romance novel, a young adult romance novel, made me want to do research into the subject matter of the novel. Who does that? Like, who has that skill? Like, well done. I love this, Ali. You just hit it in the park again. I apologise for my lack of faith. I trust you implicitly now. The next thing I read, or rather listened to, and then had to be rant about, was The Honeymoon Crashers by Christina Lauren. This book, see, right, I am a person, I'll explain. I'm a person who fully believes that audiobooks count as books. Audiobooks are reading, and don't argue with me, you're not going to get anywhere. It's reading, end of. However, this is only available as an audiobook from Audible. It is not available as written text anywhere. You cannot get a Kindle version, you cannot get a hard copy version. It is only available via audio. And so I'm not happy with that for many reasons. One, I enjoyed the story enough that I would like a physical copy to keep on my shelves. Two, it is highly inaccessible to anybody who cannot use audiobooks. That is a problem to me. Accessibility is one of my top priorities for so many things. I feel like if you are putting out to a large audience like this, you should be making things accessible. Like, I have just hit 300 subscribers, which, like, thank you so much for like, wow. Like, 300 people in a room looking at me would be borderline terrifying. I've done it before, but, like, you know what I mean? It'd be borderline terrifying. But I'm a very small creator. I do this as a hobby, right? And I feel intense guilt that I don't have proper captions on these videos, because I know that captions are so important to so many people. Not only people who are deaf, but people who have issues with processing, there are so many different reasons people may use captions, even down to language barriers. And I don't have the spoons, the ability, the pretty much, like, I don't have the ability in myself to sit and type out the captions. I've tried it before and it literally made me sick. Like, I had to go and be sick because I was in so much pain from sitting, like, doing that. Like, even a 20-minute video, 10-minute video, I talk quite fast and I say a load of crap. So, like, doing all that out makes me feel, like, makes me really unwell, and it flares up my pain, flares up my issues. So, like, because of my issues, because of my disability, it stops me from being able to do what I, like, as much as I want with these videos. Like, that's why I feel like they're edited so poorly. Not poorly, but, like, I do the bare minimum for editing. I do the bare minimum for filming. This is all a one shot. Like, I don't, if I'm doing a lot of work for a video, it's like once in a blue moon. So, like, when I did my bookshelf tour, when I do my year-long wrap-up, like, I'm doing the bare minimum otherwise because I physically cannot handle it. But when you're a big production company and a big author, or authors, because Christine and Lauren are two people, I feel like accessibility should be key in your, you know, processing of your books. Anyway, book-wise, story-wise, really enjoyed the story. But because Harry Shum Jr. voices one of the characters, all I could see was Harry Shum Jr. Now, Harry Shum Jr. is an Asian man with dark hair and brown eyes. The character was like blonde-haired surfer dude with blue eyes, and I couldn't, anytime, because I knew Harry Shum Jr.'s voice, anytime I was listening to him, I could see Harry Shum Jr. in my head, and then a comment would be made about his blonde hair or his blue eyes, and I'd be like, huh? And I'd have to recalibrate in my head, which, again, where having the, like, visual version would help. But other than that, I quite enjoyed the story. So it's about the main characters in The Unhoneymooners, her sister, his friend. And so the couple from The Unhoneymooners are going to elope, and her sister's like, nah, you don't want to elope, you want the whole family there. So she gets the whole family over to Hawaii to throw her a wedding. And turns out this is what she wanted, because I had some issues with the boundaries at the start. I was like, this is just, you've crossed a hard line there. Absolutely not. But turns out, like, she was, like, tricking her sister into, like, she was like, oh no, I don't want anybody to come to my wedding. But she just didn't want to ask them to, like, travel to Hawaii. So the fact that they were there, she, like, made her really, really happy. So fine, but still, like, there was a boundary issue going on there. But in the meantime, like, he's the I was going to say man of honour, what's the word? Best man, and she's the maid of honour, and obviously the plan is to, like, get them together. It's a romance novel. They're having to go around to Hawaii, or I think Maui. I think the island they're on is Maui, and, like, trying to organise a wedding in less than a week for, like, cheap. And just getting to know each other as they do. And yeah, it was great. I loved the characters. I thought they were quite well done. You get both their points of view, so you get to know more about, like, what's going on in their heads. Really, really enjoyed it. I'm disappointed in the accessibility, and think I would enjoy it more as a text-based thing, because if I'm just taking in an audiobook, like, sometimes I don't take it all in, so I need the text version. Anyway, I think I've gone on about this book long enough. I'm going to move on to the next one. And that next one is one of the ones that took me the longest to read, and that is The Bone Cave by Dougie Strachan. And look at the size of this book. It should not have been that hard to read. This man is a storyteller. This was so interesting and so rich and so just, it was such a fantastic read, and I would recommend it to anybody, especially if you're interested in Scottish folklore or being outside. Like, if you liked Wild by Cheryl Strayed and you like Scottish folklore, this is the book for you. But it was so densely packed and so heavy, like, emotionally, that it just took me ages. Like, this is one where I think you should read, like, a chapter and put it down, and then come back to it, and put it down and come back to it, because everything in this, just, you can feel the weight of it. You can feel his exhaustion as he's walking. You can feel, you know, the pain as he's walking with boots that are too small, which is also happens to Cheryl. like, you can really, really feel the emotions. You can feel how it feels to be out in the wilderness, and I just, it's so weird because I love being out in the wilderness in Scotland. I love being in the mountains. I would love to go hill walking or Munro bagging, or like, I'd love to do all that up north, but I don't have the physical ability to do that. But even just on ground level, just standing in nature away from the roads, it just absolutely fuels my battery. Like, I feel so at home. I feel whole. It's a feeling like no other. And Dougie Strang totally gets that. Like, that is how he feels. He's been a hill walker for years. He does it with his kids. His wife does it. His dad used to do it with him. And you can tell how much he loves the history and loves the country and just the mythos. It was so beautifully written, so well done, and it was so heavy that it took me so long to read this. But I am so glad I picked this up. This is going to be a book that I don't think I'll ever forget, and one that I will continue to go back to get more out of the richness of it. And then, because I needed a quick one, I read Immortally Yours by Lindsay Sands. Why did I have to look at that? I have like 30 odd of her books. Surely I would have known. This follows Colin, Scotty, and Beth. Scotty and Colin are the same person. Scotty's his nickname because he's Scottish. Very original. And basically Beth is in one of the other stories, and she used to be a prostitute at a brothel. She was rescued by Drina, who's one of the arsenaus, and she had been turned before she was rescued. And one of the team that was sent in to rescue her was Cullen, was Scotty. And he knew from that moment that she was his life mate, but she was so traumatised and so just like totally shell-shocked from the horror that she'd just been through that he was like, I am not messing this girl, I'm not messing her up right now. I am not going in there and being like, hi, I know I've just met you. I know you've just gone through one of the most horrendous things in your entire life. But do you want to come and like chill? No. He's like, absolutely not. I'm going to let her heal. I'm going to let her have time so that she can like, you know, be herself, learn who she is now, like go through all the trauma, go through the therapy that she needs, like, and then I can introduce myself and just be like, you know, hi. But that's not quite the whole story because Scotty is quite old, and Scotty has very sort of narrow ideas, especially due to personal trauma, about prostitutes. And of course he is completely wrong in his thinking when it comes to Beth, but it doesn't stop him from having these thoughts and it causing him to push her away and not want to claim her. I am so sorry. Hamish is dreaming. I'm not cutting this out. Oh, that's a big dream. Ooh. You done? I think he's done. Yeah, so basically it's about them finding each other again and having to deal with both their prejudices and things like that. It's very like Pride and Prejudice meets My Fair Lady. Sorry, he's so funny. He's so cute. He's totally KO'd and just like dreaming and barking in his sleep. But like he's not opening his mouth, so going I can't even remember how much I said about this, but yeah, this is a reread. I liked it much better on reread than I did the first time. I think the reason I didn't like it the first time is because the Scottish dialect in this is terrible. Like, please, I beg you, authors, if you're writing a Scottish character, don't try and write the dialect in text. Just don't do it. Or, like, at least get somebody who's Scottish to read over it, because this man had, like, several dialects. None of them were right. And it just pained me every time I had to read it. I had to sometimes read it out loud to translate it to myself. As you can hear, I am Scottish. So I don't know how this is going to be for anybody who's not Scottish to read. And then the next book is the second one that took me an absolute age to read, and that is The Cities of Dead by Alice Arden. And you can see why this took me so long. Ow. This book is... Chunky doesn't even cut it, like... I mean, it is chunky, like it's 639 pages, but this is also heavy, like, heavy book. This book is the third in the Casket Girls series. I believe there's going to be 5 books. We do not have any news of the 5th one yet, but yeah, this is the 3rd one. I don't really know. I don't really want to spoil it by telling you about it, but the Casket Girls in general is about our main character, Adele, who is, so her dad lives in New Orleans and her mum lives in France, and she had been living with her dad and there had been a massive storm and New Orleans got completely ruined. It's like Katrina-esque. So she'd been living in France with her mum and then came back to America to stay with her dad. New Orleans gets hit by the storm. Everybody has to get evacuated, and the first book is them coming back to New Orleans after the storm and dealing with the aftermath of it. And the way she writes this is so visceral, like you feel like you're there. The descriptions of New Orleans, the description of the devastation, to the people, to the places, everything is just incredibly written in this and very quite graphic. What Adele doesn't know is that she is a witch. She is descendant of witches and she is a witch. And she ends up meeting a few other people who are also embroiled in the supernatural in some way. And the tale of the Casket Girls is not so much of a myth as she thought. So the Casket Girls were a group of girls that were brought over from like mainland Europe mostly. And they were brought over because there were so many men in the colonies, but not enough women for them to have wives. So they were brought over to be wives, basically, for these men. And they were taken to the Ursuline convent, which is where they lived, and their, I think their luggage was called cassettes. I think it was the French is cassette, but it looks like casket, and they looked like caskets. But the tale is, when they opened some of them, they were completely empty, but they had been heavy when they were taken to the attic. And the story is that that's how vampires arrived in New Orleans. This is a very old legend in New Orleans, and it is one that is used time and time and time again in fiction to do with New Orleans. It is used as part of the lore for the originals, which is a Vampire Diaries spin-off. It is used in pretty much all New Orleans, like, fantastical retellings, and it's a very famous story that is told as you're doing like tours and stuff in New Orleans. I would love to go to New Orleans because I've read so much about it and it seems so rich with history. But back to this. So yeah, that's how vampires got to New Orleans, and of course with her being a witch there's some issues with the vampires, and turns out she's about to get pulled into it whether she likes it or not. And thus starts her journey, and this is the 3rd book. We are very deep into this journey, and everything is really hitting the fan in this book. Like, the 2 other books seem like they're like action packed, but they are nothing on this book. This is just really like, decisions are made. It's funny because this is really action packed, but also a setup for the next book. And I just like, thank you, Radiator. And yeah, I cannot tell you how much I love Alice Harden's writing. And I think she's done a fantastic job talking about New Orleans, from what I understand. I've even been on Google Maps and like traced like where the characters are going, and she's got all the streets right. So like, I'll talk about it in a minute, a book that was written and it's in Scotland and it didn't do this as well. If you are from New Orleans and you've read this, tell me what you think, please, because I don't know anything really about New Orleans from a personal perspective, but for me, I feel like this has done a good job. The next thing I read was, here we go, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This has been compared to The House in the Cerulean Sea, which kind of put me off the idea of reading it. It is like a whimsical fantasy romance book about this girl, Mika, or this woman, Mika, who's asked to come to this house to teach the 3 witches who are there, but witches are not meant to be like together in one space because magic goes awry. And it's so much more than that. I really enjoyed this book. I thought this was an absolute win. Like, could it have been tweaked in some places? Of course, every book can be, some more than others, but I really liked what this book did. I really like how it dealt with the differences in relationships that people had, be it with parents, with siblings, with adopted parents, with just the people around them, their found family. Because in this world as well, witches will always be orphaned. After their birth and at some point during their childhood, their parents will die in a horrible way. And it's just known that all witches' parents will die. And so the only way witches can be raised is by adoptive parents of some kind, be it that they're adopted and nobody knows they're a witch, or in Mika's case where another witch has stepped in to look after her because Mika's mum was a witch and Mika's mum's mum was also a witch, so she had like ties to the community. This, I just really enjoyed this. I don't know what else to say about this. It's just, if you're worried about it, I would just give it a chance. This is just a book that really pulls on your heartstrings, and just, I don't know, it just made me feel happy. And then the last book I read was also a little bit of a womp, and that was Do Your Worst by Rosie Dannon, and that pains me to say. By the end of the book I was enjoying it, but this book is about our main character, well, both our main characters, who go to work in a castle in Scotland. And now we've got the male main character, who is an archaeologist, a disgraced archaeologist, who is sent by the historical people in Scotland to have a look around and make sure that there's no artefacts that will be destroyed if they redevelop this land. And she is there to break a curse on the castle that has been there for centuries. And obviously he doesn't believe in what she's doing, so he's immediately an antagonist to her. And yeah, it's that part of it was fine. Like the if it take all the stuff about Scotland that bugged me that I'll talk about in a minute, and just focus on the romance, it was fine. It was good. Like, it wasn't as good. Hamish, can you please stop? Thank you. Now he's digging. It wasn't as good as other Rosie Dannon books. I just found there to be like moments where you were missing a step. It was like you missed a step going down the stairs. That's how it felt to read it, and sometimes I had to go back and read a little bit more. Unfortunately, some of the issues I had were because it was set in Scotland, so it's set in this town, I can't even remember what town it is, but it's like the northwest coast. And she goes into the bar and she's like, since I'm so close to Isla, I'm going to have a whiskey. And it's like, I looked at, it's not actually that close to Isla, like, Isla's kind of down here and this is up here. But like, closer than America, I suppose. Like, I'll give you that one, fine. You don't need to pay import taxes. I'll give you that, it's closer than America. And then at one point I pulled out Google Maps because they drove down to St Andrews in 4 hours, and I was like, nah, no way she's driving that in 4 hours. But yeah, you know, fastest time on maps was actually 4 hours and 4 minutes, so fair enough to you. And even if he said like around a 4 hour road trip, fine. Like, I can get behind it being like 4 and a bit hours and you being like roughly 4 hours. Fine. But I had to pull up maps because that's how annoyed I was about this book being set in Scotland. That I was like, nah, you're not getting away with like this nonsense. They also go to Scythe for a day trip. Like, things in Scotland, I know for Americans, like, distances are a totally different kettle of fish, but here, as the crow flies, things are very close together. As you have to drive it, it's not very close together. And they're just hopping about to all these different places in the car, and I'm like, where are you going? What are you doing? You have to spend, like, that's a day trip. Like, anyway. But the thing that immediately got my back up, there was two things that immediately got my back up, and I talk about them in my vlog. Every single bloody time she spells whiskey in this, she spells it with an E. Now that might not seem like a big deal, but Scottish whiskey is without an E. There's a difference. And she goes on about, like, she drops names in here, like she drops Isla in. She drops Lagavulin in, which is an Isla whiskey. Like, she obviously knows a little bit about Isla whiskies, except that they've not got an E in them. That really, it bothered me, and you don't understand the level of bothered unless you're Scottish and you care about the whiskey industry. And so every time she did it, it annoyed me. Like, somebody's missed it. Somebody's missed it when they've been editing. Like, if it had only been once, I would be like, you know what, it's fine. I got my every single time. It's like, whiskey, 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 whiskey. I'm like, no, it's not. You're not drinking whiskey. If you're drinking Lagavulin, you're not drinking whiskey with an E. You're drinking whiskey without an E. And then the bartender, who is Scottish, refers to it as Scotch. No, she didn't. Because no, we don't. Like, she hands it to the bar and she asks for, I think it's Lagavulin. She asks for Lagavulin. And she says to her, it's like, oh, you have good taste in Scotch. A bartender would never say that to you. Like, you wouldn't have that conversation. Maybe if you're, like, I don't even know, but, like, you wouldn't you wouldn't have that conversation in a bar. Like, they'd be like, here's your whiskey. Like, they would at least call it whiskey. Like, they wouldn't call it scotch. We don't call it scotch here. Especially in, like, a local pub in arsehole nowhere on the west coast. Like, they wouldn't call it scotch. And these are tiny, tiny, tiny little things that I am making a mountain, an absolute mountain out of a molehill. But I'm very particular when it comes to Scottish things done wrong, when it's stuff that can be easily Googled. Like, we all know, and I keep talking about it, we all know the issues I had with Rebecca Yarros absolutely bastardising Gaelic. And you only saw the tip of the iceberg. My friends have got voice notes on voice notes of me complaining about that. And that is up there with one of my favourite books of the year last year. Maybe not in my top 10, but like, you know. And this didn't have enough good going for it to allow me to ignore the mistakes. If you don't care about that, I think you'll enjoy it. I enjoyed the little dip into folklore that we had, but I feel like this tried to do too much. It tried to do too much in too little space, at too shallow a level, and it felt like a skim of a book, like it skimmed over the top of everything. And yeah, it did get better as it went on with the relationship with his dad and her mum, like, not them to get like her and her mum and him and his dad. And I just wish if she'd given this book an extra 100 pages and dug in on some of these things, it could have been great. But unfortunately, it just wasn't all there for me. I still really enjoyed it. I'll still read whatever Rosie Dannon puts out next, but my expectations for this were so high and I just feel quite let down. Well, on that depressing note, that is all the books I read in January. Fortunately, the first thing I read in February was excellent, and hopefully we're going to keep that going. If you want to leave me an emoji instead of writing a comment because you have nothing to say, just leave me a Scottish flag emoji, because we need some love for Scotland after that whole tirade, because unfortunately American authors do be doing it when they're writing about Scotland. They really, really do. So show some love to Scotland in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!